Frank runs his YouTube channel. Quite frankly, you can catch him on his podcast. You can see him on Twitter. I'll be putting all the links at the bottom of the video. And I'd like to welcome Frank back on the X22 Report Spotlight. Frank, welcome back to the Spotlight.
Hi, I am so happy to be here. It's just always a great honor, Dave, and I love hanging out with you. And thank you for the warm introduction and another invite back to the show. And let's have some fun here.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for coming back. And hey, thanks for having me on your show. That was really a great time. And I wanted to start off, and we talked about this before, about censorship, the Google algorithm. And people are starting to notice that there is a real change in the Google algorithm, because the things that you used to type into into Google was like Rachel Chandler, Hillary Clinton email, and then it wouldn't give you the suggestion of scandal. Now it does. And we're starting to see things change. We're also starting to see things change on Twitter, where certain words that never trend before were trending, and things started to change a little bit on Twitter. What do you think is happening? Why do you think all of a sudden the algorithms have changed?
First of all, I don't have a lot of technical background on this stuff, but I do have people I go to ask questions. Last night when you were on, I read an exclusive that Zach Voorhees sent on over to give us some perspective as to why he feels something at Google might have changed. Now, and I also would like to say that I don't know the extent of how these algorithms have been loosened or how things have been reprioritized in search results and what had once been banned and blacklisted search terms might have been removed. I also don't know outside of what the margin of that loosening has been. I don't know how long this will even last. Is it a temporary measure? Was it a shot across the bow? A little bit of something, but something has happened. All those weird Jimmy Comet pictures from Instagram are back. Vaccine skepticism is coming up with new search results. The Democrat Party logo was changed from a donkey to a rat. And I can't even say some of the things that are back on the radar because I want to keep your channel and my channel open, but 4chan was buzzing with it all night. On Wednesday night, or no, I'm sorry. That was, what is it? The 16th, late night, the 16th, going into the 17th, St. Patrick's Day, and they were seeing it, and they were getting really excited because these things were popping up. And so let me give you an example. You brought up Rachel Chandler. I went and tested that name too. It was the #1 search term that popped up. I had only typed into the search field RACH. Okay, out of all the Rachels in the world, for that one to be the top, it's responding to something, and it's not being beaten down anymore. I had been using Swiss Cows as a search engine for months now, ever since Dr. Robert Epstein suggested it after he made those amazing he made those amazing statements before the Senate Judiciary Committee about how Google was manipulating the minds of Americans and may have impacted the 2016 vote from anywhere from 2 to 10 million votes without them even knowing subconsciously. So I started paying attention to him, and I haven't even been using Google. So I went back and I started just typing around a little bit. And I got to say, it's one of those things where a couple of weeks ago, I could guarantee you, and I have to go to Google for some things because Swiss Cows doesn't allow certain types of searches, and just out if they think that it comes from places like 4chan that has uncensored discussions, but it also, it has pornographic material on there. So Swiss Cows stays away from anything like that. But when I went to Google, if I put in adrenochrome, all right, just something really considered to be fringe out there. I put adrenochrome uses into Google search engine. I cannot tell you the last time, Dave, that I have seen any search on Google of anything that was controversial pop up when the top three search engine results coming from places like disclose.tv or a random blog called Exposing Pedivores on the top three results. So I don't know what I'm looking at. I don't know how long it'll last, but something has gotten jogged loose.
Yeah, something definitely has. And it seems like it happened when Trump was talking about having Google create a website and there were engineers working with the government to create this website that, it will tell you if you need to get a test or not get a test. And he said this was going to be built. Of course, the mainstream media was out there saying there's no agreement whatsoever. Google then came out a little bit later saying, yes, there is some type of agreement. Google, in the beginning, when Trump was mentioning this, they had no idea. So it seems like there was a little bit of confusion of what was going on, but then Google fell in line and they created the website, and you don't need 1,700 engineers to create this simple website. I think at that point, that's when everything changed. And you had Zach Voorhees, he told you that you don't need 1,700 engineers to make this type of website.
No. In fact, when you were on last, I waited until you were on the phone before I read what he had submitted for me to read onto the show. And on that particular point, he said this. I actually just pulled it up as you were talking, so I had it ready. As far as the if-else chain that you're talking about, where people put in their symptoms and they get a response back from the website to go get tested. And along with the recommendation to go get tested or not get tested, it'll also connect them to the closest testing center that is like the closest drive distance to them. And he said this as to put some perspective on what kind of an undertaking the creation of this kind of a website would be. He said that this is a task that one engineer over the course of one weekend would be able to set up. He said it's really that simple. He went on to say, instead, we have word that there are 1,700 engineers on this project now, and it doesn't make any sense to him because it also costs so much more money. He said to me, I believe that this is a way that Trump is buying out Google with a carrot and stick approach, or drawing them out in some way. He has the stick due to the dirt that people like Zach Voorhees, has exposed. And now here's the carrot, which is a gigantic payout. So within 24 hours of this announcement, Google changed its search algorithms drastically. We saw a rat appear for the first time as a Democrat Party mascot, as well as 9/11 truther stuff and Pizzagate stuff starting to surface. So he opines at the end and says, it looks like the White Hats have made a big win here and may now soon be in control of Google. I don't know. Like I said before, I don't know if this is a flash in the pan or how marginal the changes have been, Dave, but something within the last 48 hours has been very, very visibly different. And that's all we got.
And it's funny because people are noticing this on Twitter also, where all of a sudden we're having certain hashtags trend where they never trended before. Now, what's very interesting about this, do I think this is a permanent thing? For some reason, I think what the White Hats are doing right now, I think they're showing Google, Twitter, and the rest that they have control. And I just want to go back to one of Q's posts, because this was March 17th. Now, I think it was 16th when Trump came out and talked about the website. Well, going into the 17th, there's an interesting post. It says, and it's 3109. It says, thanks for playing at Jack. Showing your hand was the intended target. The strike will be fast. Shall we play a game? Now, this is very odd, and I've been going back to Q's past posts during either a year or 2 years on these dates, and the information on Q's posts kind of align with what is going on right now. I'll give you another example where back in March of 17th of 2018, there was a post that said, Red Castle, Green Castle, clock has started. They're coming online. Now, everyone at that time thought it had to do with the wall that was being built, because Red Castle, Green Castle is the Army Corps of Engineers. But the exact date that Q posted that also referred to the Army Corps of Engineers going into New York, which was approved. Which I find, it could be a coincidence. I don't believe in coincidence, but it could be just, maybe it just happened on the same time, the same day. It just had to refer to the same Army, Corps of Engineers being activated. I find it very odd that these are matching up now at the exact dates. Maybe not in 2020. They're matching up in 2019, 2018. And I feel like there's another operation going on behind the scenes. I don't know what you think and what your take is on all of this, but I find it very interesting that all of this is happening at the time that the coronavirus is happening at the same time.
Well, when it comes to Q, I've always sat back and watched what people like yourself and other channels and have been able to draw conclusions, or not so much conclusions, but almost like it's almost like in the Goonies, where they have the doubloon, and they're looking through the doubloon, and they see how the rocks and the lighthouse and the restaurant all match up. It's like tracing putting a stencil on top of things. And I have referenced Q personally in my personal reading as almost like one of many stencil tracings that I put on top and see, if we're all, where the storyline is progressing and what is lining up. And the one thing that I always take away from this is I just rack up all the synchronicities that are going on. And so when you're talking about synchronicities that you were just bringing up, that you had seen going back and tracing through dates and watching year to year progressions on certain messages and updates in the news and reality, is the same thing that I see in general with this whole story about coronavirus. For example, the synchronicities of the dates with this Event 201 and the Wuhan military games in October 2019, all going on at the same time. And then what happened? So for example, October 18th, 2019 in New York, you have this get together that was sponsored by the World Economic Forum and Bill and Melinda Gates. And it's in New York. They have 15 representatives from foreign nations, NGOs, the CDC, intelligence agencies. China was there. And then at the same day, on the 18th, on 2009, in October, in Wuhan, the place which is considered ground zero for the global pandemic, is this joint military games where you had thousands of troops from like over 109 countries or something like that. The U.S. had 300 troops there that day. And then that concludes those days, those games conclude on the 27th of October. Well, we now know that the incubation period for this virus is about 5 to 14 days. Well, if you're talking about these games being concluded on pretty much the last days of October, isn't it now interesting how the first confirmed case of this COVID-19 Wuhan flu that everybody's talking about has now been established as November 17th, which is like just 2 weeks after the games concluded. Now, I don't know what happened. You have a cover of so many countries going on in there. I'm not saying that the United States Army did this. I'm just saying that like the Chinese are saying, but there's so much going on, and we know what these deep state shadow government types are willing to do to sow discord, not only domestically but around the world. Why is this timeline of events not more taken more seriously, especially since the first infections all line up? All we have to do is really just muse and consider whose intent and what motives may win out. But as far as synchronicity goes, I think we have that popping up all over the place.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, it's funny how the dates and if this is the way they made it spread, where you had the people there from different countries and they went back to their countries, this would allow it to spread very, very slowly and have it creep up in all different countries. And the other thing I find very interesting, also in mid-December, I don't know if you remember this, but Obama put out a message about his $10 Christmas gifts. And in that message, in the background, it had Chinese colors. He also had a Zen garden, and he talked about the Green Goblin and how he likes construction, but he doesn't like the Green Goblin. And the Green Goblin had like $100 bill in its hand, and it was looked like a Lego toy actually. And that message went out there, and he was talking about health insurance. That now is the time that we have to have health insurance. Time is ticking down, and it seems like this all is starting to fit together because of what you're saying, what happened in December, and then we come to find out later in 2019 there was this huge spread and moving into January, then February. It seems like these timelines and everything that has been happening is starting to all fit together for one particular reason or another. Which brings me to my next question. Do you think this was an accident, or do you think that this was done on purpose?
I don't know. And my question, because I always try to bring up new questions to ask the audience every night. I'm very, very hesitant of drawing any kind of hard conclusions. But the question I had last night, based on a lot of things, the questions that people send to me in email, and I always consider those emails in evolving the ongoing conversation about things like this. And I started saying that, well, the more I think about it, it does make sense. It's at least plausible, feasible, that this was some kind of deep state delivery of a virus in Wuhan by way of the cover of those joint military games on the same day that Event 201 kicked off. And what I started thinking about was, do you remember, Dave, the Skripal poisoning in the UK that was pegged? They tried to peg it on Putin.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Well, the first thing that popped in my mind was Skripal and the poisoning in the UK. Only this time I said, well, why don't we take that model and go global with it? What did we learn about the Skripal poisoning? Now they're trying to, it was obviously something that could be used to bolster the narrative at that time that Russia was trying to take everybody down, and they were wild men, and you have to watch out for these guys. And look, this nonsense investigation was going on in the United States. People are supposedly getting poisoned and assassinated in the UK. And what we learned about that was that they used substances that they knew Russians have had a history of using, especially KGB assassinations and all that. And they had a history of using it. It made it very believable. Well, I started asking myself, and it's just a question, it's not a conclusion, what if this coronavirus, which was engineered with the help of Western minds and had Chinese links as well, what if it was used in that way, and it would make it believable, blaming it on meat markets or a mistake at a bioweapons lab? Even if it's just close to a bioweapons lab, it would be plausible. And I'm not saying that we should trust the Chinese for any reason, but perhaps that very reasonable stance of don't trust the Chinese government can also be used as a little bit of a shield. Nobody should be demeaned for not trusting the Chi-Com government, but at the same time, that could be used as a shield right there. So my prediction is that perhaps this was some kind of a Gladio operation or something like that, because I don't know, Dave. We definitely see how it's been used. I know that the Chinese even have a vested interest in Trump going away and the old order of things coming back into alignment, because they want to keep all that manufacturing. They want to keep leeching off of American intelligence and American intellectual property. But at the same time, is it really worth the cost of shutting your entire country down, canceling very sacred cultural events like Chinese New Year, 1 billion people in quarantine? I don't know if that is a price even the crazy commies in the Chinese government would pay. So I don't know. What I do know is that the only thing that we're not talking about in this country is origins. We're talking about an economic crash that they're trying to separate from the impact of the hysteria that is being created by media about this virus. Nobody's talking about origin story. I saw Jennifer Rubin say the other day, well, if Donald Trump I predict if Donald Trump were to resign today, the stock market would shoot right up and big time. And I'm asking myself, what kind of zombies is this woman talking to, that they actually allow her to get away with separating the virus from the reason why, from the economy, as if one of Donald Trump's investments, or Donald Trump made some kind of a bet that went wrong. This has nothing to do with the president in this crash. So the way that it's being used for propaganda purposes, and the way that origin stories of this virus altogether are being avoided, it just makes me more suspect by the day.
I agree with you. And we also have to look at the timing. I mean, if we look at the timing when this occurred, now we're in the year 2020, which is the presidential election year. And it's very odd that all of a sudden that this catastrophe happened during 2020. While we have Biden, who is running, I do believe that Bernie Sanders, he's going to be out, and Biden is going to be their top candidate after everything said and done. Do I think he's going to make it to the end? I think they're going to do an old switcheroo of some sort and bring in different individuals. But I just find it very interesting that the timing that where this whole thing is happening is during the presidential election year. And you said that there are certain individuals that are blaming Trump, saying that, it's his fault. He didn't react fast enough. The market's coming down because he didn't react fast enough. Actually, in Davos, Switzerland, we even had George Soros saying, and this was in January, listen, it is time for the bubble to pop. It's time for the stock market to come down. The economy is overheated and it's about to come down. I do believe that was a signal, another signal, letting everyone know what their plan was. They always like to project out to the public what their plan is going to be and how they're going to do it. And I think it makes them feel better, like it's not their fault if they tell people in a certain way. And it seems that the timing of all this is very suspect.
Well, Dave, isn't it amazing? And I was predicting the same thing that many other people were saying, that they were at least going to try to keep this primary race close so that they can go to a brokered convention and whatever. That doesn't seem to be the case. It looks like Joe Biden is on the cusp of clinching this thing, which only bolsters another idea I had, which is, well, then they're going to try to surround him, as you were saying, with a vice president who's pretty much going to be the brains of the operation, maybe Hillary. They're going to surround him with potential cabinet members that could, or prospective cabinet members who could all chip in to make up for what this man clearly lacks. And that is, it really only goes around to support my thinking that Biden actually being taken more and more as a serious candidate for the nomination here is really just another one of those very weak firewalls to potentially protect themselves from any further action on what was going on out there in Ukraine, and to further maybe even bolster the idea that the impeachment was in any way legitimate. Because if you remember, the whole reason for impeaching Donald Trump was, well, he's going out there abusing power in Ukraine, and he's trying to cut down a political candidate who, up until New Hampshire, was polling 4th and 5th in those primaries. He was dead in the water. Everybody was like, this is who Donald Trump needed help from Ukraine to defeat. And now all of a sudden he's surging and he's unstoppable. I mean, Donald Trump did not need Ukraine to beat this man. So just by giving him, making sure that he has the nomination and making it look legitimate at this point, I believe only just ties into some kind of a Ukraine defense again.
Well, what's very interesting as we're talking about Biden, for a individual who's running for president, where he says that he's only going to be a one-term president, he doesn't think he can do two. Why would anyone vote for a person who says, I can barely finish out one, I can't do two? I mean, really think about that. And plus, he's on the campaign trail, and there is tons of video footage, not doctored, not manipulated, showing where he's forgetting where he is, what he's talking about, and it seems like he's having a mental breakdown. Now, personally, I think this is not a real mental breakdown. I think he's putting on an act, because I do believe, like you said, there's going to be someone else that's going to be brought into the picture. Actually, I think there's going to be two other people that are going to be brought into the picture, and Biden's going to be stepping aside, and he's going to hand over the delegates to these individuals. This is my personal thought. I think it's going to be Michelle Obama, Hillary Clinton, who was already in the government, worked in the government. Her husband was president. Having these two individuals go up against Trump, I believe this is what they're planning on, and using this event that we're watching happen in real time right now, the coronavirus, I think they're trying to weaken him enough, trying to blame it on him enough so they can eventually bring in these two people and actually have a fighting chance against him during the election.
Yeah, that'll be great. That'll be great. I mean, it's just, you think about Hillary Clinton, who, I mean, and I'll tell you, Dave, this woman, the fact that we're even talking about her in a present tense way, that she's still out there walking around and has an opportunity to become a presidential candidate again after 4 years, is really infuriating. That's number one. But you talk about her record of lawlessness and her record of not responding when a crisis was in process. that'll be a great person to go up against Donald Trump and all the blame they're trying to throw onto his shoulders over a virus that started on the other side of the world. And as far as Michelle Obama goes, what's her big achievement aside from ruining school lunches for millions of children across the country? This is, if we're really just talking about voting on genitals and skin color, this is as worse as it gets. But as far as Biden goes, I tend to think that they're going to ride it out with him. And maybe put something as a little bit more of a puppeteer VP. I think that Hillary Clinton will be a part of this a lot more than Michelle Obama will. Maybe she'll become a campaign hype man or something like that, and get on out there and try to rile up the crowds and try to enrich this a bit more, put a little bit more girl power into the mix. But I think that Biden Clinton would be interesting. And I think that as far as the one-term president goes, I see that kind of a statement right there as, obviously it's all rooted in desperation. But you ever see those movies or those television shows where everybody's in a capsized boat and they are under the boat and they're trying to figure out a way out. But first thing that they have to do is find a little pocket of air to pop their heads out just for a second, have a reprieve, and think about something they can do to save their lives. Joe Biden, anybody, to actually slip into the presidency and knock Donald Trump out, that would be like finding a pocket of air in a capsized boat, just to be able to breathe for 4 years and try to put more roadblocks in the way of anything that's going on right now that they are so afraid of being concluded in a meaningful way. I think that's the greatest thing that they can play for right now. So it totally makes sense to me why he would say, hey, listen, I can only give you 4 years, but isn't that only really what they need? That's exactly what they need right now. They just need some kind of reprieve.
Yeah, and I mean, if it does happen where Biden is teamed up with Hillary Clinton, I don't even know if he'll make it the first term. I think he might step out because of mental problems, and Hillary Clinton move right into the presidency. I mean, and then she becomes president. But again, they would have to win. And I go back to, is Biden, Clinton strong enough to even compete against Trump? I mean, when you talked about the polls just before, how Biden, realistically, he was in 4th and 5th. And just because these other individuals dropped out and they gave them all as delegates, because who else is there to vote for now? I mean, you have Bernie Sanders or Biden, and you know the whole thing's rigged, and you know that they're going to give everything to Biden. That's how he got to where he was, or is. I don't know if he's enough to go up against Trump right now. That's my personal one. What I wanted to ask you is, how do you think this whole event is going to play out? Do you think this is, I mean, there are some predictions that this is going to go all the way into August, some predictions saying that this is going to be a year, some predictions saying that we're going to see millions of people die. How do you think this is all going to play out?
My gut, all I have is my gut, and
that's
my
the best
gut
thing.
Yeah, all I have is my gut, and what I see in my head for April and May is, I see, trees blossoming. I see the bright, beautiful yellow forsythia bushes blossoming. I hear birds. I see sun. I see being outside, spring cleaning, open windows, fresh air, the smell of lemon pledge in the house, and just cleaning and just getting on with things. And I don't know. I feel like a freshness of spring coming along, and the dankness and the closed window, stale air of winter going away. And for these predictions of July, August, maybe. I mean, I'm no virologist or a soothsayer here, but I just think that it's not going to be that long. It's not going to be as devastating. It will be deadly, of course, to some people, which is awful. But if you think about the hundreds of thousands of preventable deaths under all categories every year that are completely ignored at this point, from prescription drug overdoses to the 400,000 deaths a year that take place in hospitals with just malpractice. All the things that can be the 3,000 car deaths. What do we have? That daily, yearly? I don't know. There's so much death, so much of it preventable that we talk about every year. And the fact that we are seeing, I think now the death toll here in the United States is over 100 now. Well, the stock market and the world didn't crash to its knees, even when we had 13,000 deaths over here during the swine flu epidemic. And so much of it feels like the reaction doesn't match up with the reality. The reaction and the impact doesn't match up with the mortality rates that we're being given. Obviously, we need to look out for our elderly and our sick. Everybody should take responsibility and be careful in their own ways. But I think that if you just give people solid, clean information as individuals, as private businesses, as congregations and churches, everybody tends to make decisions that are better for themselves without the need for lockdowns and destruction of local and national economies. So there's so much that doesn't match up for me. And I just feel like with a change of season is going to come a change of perspective and personal habits, and we're going to be all right. I just hope it's sooner rather than later, obviously, but I think it's going to be sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's going to be a hot spring and a hot summer. Frank, thank you very much for being on the X22 Report Spotlight. Once again, how can people see all your work?
Oh, well, you know what? Everything now, I've been taking, quite frankly, podcast.com more and more seriously. It is a hub for all things that I do at my show. There is the blog that I publish frequent show notes and other thoughts. There is a way that right there on the front page, you can watch the show from the D Live embed. That it's also where the future, quite frankly, network is going to be. And but other than that, I'm live every night, 7 to 9 on Twitch, on YouTube, on Periscope, on D Live, and then of course you can consume it on demand on any of the video or podcast platforms. And quite frankly, podcast.com. That's where you can get everything. Thank you again, Dave.
Yes, thank you for being on the Spotlight. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. I'll be putting all the links at the bottom of the video to make it easier to click on it. Go right over to Frank's